Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Need Some Introduction. On this podcast, we go week to week, watching a streaming favorite and providing some context, some recommendations, some commentary along the way, camaraderie as well, hopefully. Joining me for this conversation is Sona.
Hi.
How you been? Any news of the week? I had an eventful week, which I kind of already, Kim and I already discussed it on the podcast in our last conversation. But how have you been?
I've been good. I'm trying to think about what I've been up to that is worth discussing, and it's not much.
You haven't been
Youth
traveling.
soccer, spring season kicking off. So my life is about to revolve around the soccer season again, and work is keeping me busy. I've got a couple of work trips coming up, but nothing worth remarking on, I would say.
I have three pop culture things to throw in there that we might want to discuss. Firstly, did you watch any of the Academy Awards? I actually only watched about half of it last night. And then I literally on the YouTube channel, which is incredibly convenient, by the way, that they didn't used to do this because I guess they saw it as a competition. But now YouTube has all of the, snippets, the monologues. And what's so funny about it is I literally just clicked through like all the monologues, all the sketches, all the acceptance speeches, which of course get cut off after 2 minutes. So some of them are a little bit more than 2 minutes, but most of them are 2 minutes or under. And I'm pretty sure I saw everything that I saw in any article reference to this show in about an hour, maybe an hour and 15 minutes total. I even watched some of the backstage stuff, which of course is not in the actual broadcast, the people being interviewed behind the scenes. So I even watched that, and it took me about an hour. And what I still cannot understand, they start this thing this year. They started it at 7:00 here on the East Coast. And why does this show drag on for 3 or 4 hours?
Right.
When it appears that the actual content is about an hour and a half. I do not understand why they can't make this thing work, but it's an astonishment to me. But I don't know if you watched any of it or heard anything about the awards.
In this phase of life, as we've discussed, I watch very few movies. So it was hard to be too invested in this. And then on top of that, I think you and I have discussed before, I just find awards programs to be so self-congratulatory. Like, I just really think it's a lot of spectacle for the sake of spectacle. So I'm not particularly interested in most of it, to be honest.
I honestly only most years, even like last year when Anora won, which I was a big fan of.
Right.
That I was very happy that Anora won because in general, and I said this on the last podcast as well, I honestly only care about the Academy Awards nowadays. I do like the intro, the Conan O'Brien's intro to the episode was very funny. So I do think the monologue was funny. Did think the cold open, which references the movie Weapons, was very funny. All the snippets they threw in there where he was inserting himself into the movie early on were kind of spoilers for the movies they were in. I'm like, I think he's spoiling all these movies. But aside from that, I guess the assumption is that most people have watched these movies. That I did win all the awards this year. But what I was going to say is that what I primarily like is when a movie like Anora wins, and I'm like, oh, this movie is going to be seen by so many more people now, which makes me root for the film. But in general, if like there is a film that everybody kind of consensus pick that it's going to win, and it's already made a lot of money, and it, like you said, it's like a very inside Hollywood thing, kind of patting itself on the back, I really don't care, to be honest. It's just like, okay, just more congratulations on top of itself. But this year in general, I did think these were some good nominees. And I do like the diversity. Like, you have a Brazilian film nominated for Best Film. You have, a Norwegian film nominated for Best Film. I like the fact that it encompasses this kind of these blockbusters as well. Like Sinners, of course, a hugely successful film, but also the Brazilian film that is relatively unseen. And I've heard is a huge hit on Hulu, just premiered on Hulu recently. So, that's all great. But, the actual content of the show or these people patting themselves on the back. And also the acceptance speeches weren't like, there was nothing like truly shocking in it. The one story that I think irritating to the point of what you said is the fact that in the end, that when you really get under the covers, it's just this weird conversation being had by these insiders. And it's also like a political campaign. And Michael B. Jordan, by the way, won Best Actor for a dual performance. He plays twins in
Right.
Sinners. He's very good in that. And I was glad to see him win. Not my choice for the best of those performers, but definitely one of the absolute best performances of the year. Undoubtedly, definitely should have been nominated. So happy to see him win. But I also thought that, Timothée Chalamet very well should have won. He's also had a string of incredibly good performances. So, he's still very young. I'm sure he'll have many more.
Yeah.
So, all of that is to say. But more importantly is it seems like he lost this award because he said something off the cuff about people don't really care about opera and ballet, which...
But then I heard that those remarks were made after the voting was closed. Is that not true?
No, apparently the voting continued through that final week. So I think that it's very funny. You kind of saw it in the odds where he was odds-on favorite to win. And then the odds flipped and it did end up being Michael B. Jordan. But I don't think it was only that. I think that was kind of the nail in his coffin. But I do think that there was a momentum shift towards the end of the awards run. He had been winning most of them. And then Michael B. Jordan did win like the BAFTA, and he won some of the last of the awards. But that may have already started to indicate that there was a vibe shift. But most of the voting, to your point, most of the voting was actually done before. So I don't think it was just that.
I see. So it wasn't closed, but a lot of people had their votes in at the point.
Yes. So it was like late in I think there's a lot of people who are still catching up on things, people who actually want to be completists, and they do wait to vote. And that last batch of votes, which is a lot. It's like when you think about a presidential election, right? There's a lot of people who vote early, who like lock their votes in very, very early on. But the last day of elections can still sway the vote, right? So
I always vote on the last day.
There you go. You might be very much like...
And if the line is too long when I leave for work, I don't vote until I come back from work. So
exactly. There you go.
Well, I guess now I remote work a lot more, but in the past.
Right. Of course.
Yeah.
I just find it ironic that this happens over and over again, where people look, even sometimes they'll look at old social media clips or something, because under the covers, there are publicists,
of course,
and there are machinations looking for things to make you look bad in the 11th hour. But all that is to say that I think there already was a vibe shift earlier, and people kind of turned on Timothée Chalamet, and this was just the thing that was the straw that broke the camel's back.
I think. I could be wrong, but I think it's possible the Kylie Jenner thing is working against him too.
Oh, I think generationally that is he is.
Yeah, putting that together with the comments about the ballet, it feels like, okay, so it's hard. I've developed this tick of saying, I really have to stop it. But it's harder for people who take acting so seriously. That's part of my complaint, is that this is all self-congratulatory. If you take it so seriously as high art, and then you've got this guy dating a reality star and talking poorly about these forms of the arts, it kind of all will accumulate to make you seem like maybe you're not worthy.
I felt bad. I mean, I don't feel bad for these people because they're millionaires, and he is possibly the most successful. I mean, he's definitely the most successful actor of his generation, and maybe the only movie star we have left, aside from maybe DiCaprio. That's about it. Although his film grossed more than DiCaprio's film this year, if you want to do like a head-to-head comparison. And of course, also people thought DiCaprio early on was like, oh, he's definitely going to win Best Actor. And then as soon as Marty Supreme came out, everybody goes, nope, it's going to be Timothée Chalamet who wins finally after many nominations. But here's a guy who's been nominated, like 5 times, and he's only 30 years old. It's pretty early in his career for this to all be happening. But to your point, I think that the intersection of celebrity with this is not only something that irritated people, but also is a generational thing, because you think about Sean Penn, who's been so difficult in his generation. Not only has he already won 2 Academy Awards, he won again last night, and he didn't even show up. He just decided not to show up. He flew to the Ukraine, actually, is what he did. So,
and also, I always struggle with how much you can separate the work from somebody's personal life.
Right.
But in the situation of Sean Penn, a known abuser as well.
Yeah. Oh, and of course, his politics, which are, not everybody in Hollywood is as left-leaning as he is, obviously. And of course, just not only that he's left-leaning, but, a certain brand of this kind of very militant, which of course is the irony of his performance in that film in the first place, because he's kind of on the other side of that. But all that is to say that I think generationally, that type of personality does not get dinged, even when they have personal issues, like you mentioned, in an older generation. But because of the generation that Chalamet is part of, that is something that, if that's part of or a significant part of his voting block, I think he turned those people off, is what it comes down to. But that also to say that he still gave a brilliant performance. And another thing that probably dinged him again is that, you know what? He's 30 years old. And I don't think there's ever been an actor to win. Or if anybody, there might be one, but I believe there may have never been a best actor win under the age of 30. So it's like, you know what? He's definitely, maybe within a year or two, going to be nominated yet again. He was nominated last year for A Complete Unknown. Excellent performance, by the way. And he got nominated this year. And who knows? He might get nominated next year again. So nobody has to cry for Timothée Chalamet.
He'll be fine.
Exactly. And Marty Supreme is a very entertaining film. Oh, another thing I wanted to bring up, a couple of things, actually. One is, I think you've caught up on this, but maybe I'll start with the one that I don't think you caught up on and then talk about the one you have. The one that you have not caught up on, I believe, is, did you watch any of Scarpetta?
I haven't because, well, not because, but coincidentally, I did decide to check out Rooster, which we talked about.
Yeah. And I do want to talk about that, so we can, and that could be the next stop if you want to say something.
Yeah, I don't know why I'm acting it's like a 1-for-1. Obviously, I could have also watched Scarpetta. Rooster, I think, was 30 minutes long. But that was my exposure to a new TV show for the past week. And I loved it, by the way.
Yeah, that was going to be my last topic that I knew you had caught up on. So let's definitely talk about Rooster as well. But I just wanted to bring up Scarpetta because I know you were somewhat curious about this because you've read these books.
Yeah, I definitely am. And I'm curious to check it out. Is this a binge watch?
It is a binge watch. Okay. I only watched 2 episodes. This is why I'm calling it out here. And this is going to be black licorice potentially for you, potentially. And for some people, this might be an issue. So I want to somewhat recommend the show, like tell you the framing device of it. I think this is a very intriguing package in general. There's a lot of negative commentary. I'm going to save my negative commentary, which is part of the broader negative commentary for the end. But immediately, it's funny. I was just looking at social media chatter and people were furious. Nicole Kidman is not Scarpetta. Scarpetta is Italian. She's supposed to be short. They're freaking out. She's not supposed to be British. She's, and she's not trying to do any kind of Italian accent or anything like that. So people were very angry about that. I honestly, Italian people look differently. She's supposed to be like half Italian. So I'm okay with that particular thing. The structure of the show is really interesting. It is based on the first novel in the Scarpetta series and one from like 2022, a very recent one. And the reason it's based on these two is because the very first Scarpetta case was this serial killer that she caught and played by this younger actress who I don't remember off the top of my head, but she's very good and a convincing younger version of Nicole Kidman, I think. And they have all these younger versions of these characters, same characters we see in present time. Like Bobby Cannavale plays her partner, who of course is Italian. And I think one of his family members, maybe even one of his sons, plays him as a younger person. So it's very fun to have these kind of 2 versions of these characters and you keep flashing back and forth between them being younger and older. And also that they're telling the original murder case in the past. And then, of course, I think it was the 22nd book in this series, that the case gets reopened because maybe she made a mistake in the investigation. And the fact that they have both stories running in parallel, talking back and forth to each other in time, really cool structurally. And I'm intrigued. I actually want to know how this story might resolve. Then it is directed, the first 2 episodes anyway, directed by David Gordon Green, who started off making these indie, very quiet, like dramas, tragedies almost, very low budget films, and then became like part of the Danny McBride and the Seth Rogen, like he did Pineapple Express. He did a lot of these very over the top comedies and then started making horror movies. He, for example, rebooted Halloween, the recent trilogy of Halloween films that he's directed. So a very weird career he's had. And he kind of brings a blend of some of that into this, especially some of the grisly crime scenes and things like that. But also connecting it to those Halloween films is that he has Jamie Lee Curtis here playing in the book. She's a younger sister of Scarpetta, but she's not younger sister here in the book. In this adaptation, I assume. But here is where my problem is. Sona, everybody's giving a pretty good performance in this show. And speaking of David Gordon Green, and of course, she's a producer on this show, and she worked with Gordon Green on Halloween, that she's a very grounded version of Laurie Strode in those Halloween films. In this show, every time she's on screen, she is like the mom from The Bear at her most screechy and over the top. And it is every single time she appears in the show. And I honestly am intrigued by so many aspects of this show, and I cannot watch it because...
Are you getting triggered by it?
I am literally like every time. Maybe I can watch it if I simply fast forward through every single scene she's in, which is maybe a third of the show. But I don't consider that. And by the way, I'm curious to know how the case resolves. So maybe I will go back and actually fast forward through sections of it. But I can't make that a recommendation. So your mileage may vary. And by the way, I liked Jamie Lee Curtis in Everything Everywhere All at Once. I like her in The Bear, in this current season of The Bear, which is allows her to have a gradient of, reaction from the hysterical to the less hysterical. I liked her in the reboot of, I don't like those new Halloween movies, but I think she's very good in them. So it's not like I just can't stand watching her on screen, but God, this performance is so grating. It literally does not allow me to watch this series. It's crazy, but that's my reaction to it.
Interesting. Well, this sounds to me like something that I would put on during a rainy weekend and just kind of power through to the extent it holds my interest. I personally am not triggered by that character in The Bear.
Okay.
So I would probably be able to get through it, but that is interesting that she chose that kind of spin to put on the character.
Yeah. And so, I'm calling this out not to be like, I just want to, bash her or something. I actually like her as a performer and a lot of her more recent work. So I'm not just calling it out for that. It's almost like a trigger warning for people. But so I would say that I am intrigued by this in general, minus this particular, like really grating aspect of the story. So take that as a recommendation. And of course, try out episode 1. And if it doesn't grate the way it does for me, then I think people will enjoy this in general. Because it's actually conceptually a very cool way to adapt two books, kind of a book ended.
Yeah.
And I assume if this is popular, there's so many of these books that you could imagine doing something else where, you may not have a straight adaptation because I don't know the actual series, but you may not have the same exact case in 2 different books, but you could imagine them just taking things from earlier versions of the book to allow them to be in the current context and just flash back to scenes from other books that tie into the particular story, or slightly modifying an old case so that they can do this kind of book ending again. So it's interesting. I think it's an interesting experiment. And like I said, if I would want to know how the mystery resolves if it wasn't for the fact that it's like nails on a chalkboard in episode 2. In episode 1, it was like maybe 25% of the episode. In episode 2, it was like 50-50. I'm like, I got to tap out. I have to tap out unless they minimize this character in the future.
For my own psychological well-being, I'm out.
I can't do it. And then I do want to talk about Rooster very briefly. Before then, I just want to shout out to the audience in general that, and this is something for you, Sona, that you could sample this Tuesday night, a Wednesday premiere, quote unquote, on Apple, but Tuesday night, actually, we get the first 3 episodes possibly, but definitely the first 2 episodes of the Imperfect Women, which is another
great
book adaptation, I should say. And I'm very curious. Yeah, let's sample this and then we can touch base next week. Okay, so you caught up on Rooster. I don't think we've talked about it in too much detail. As a matter of fact, I was going to take some notes last night. I was watching it because I do laugh a lot during the show, but the comedy is so subtle and observational. I mean, it's
Okay, wait a second. I just want to be clear. I've only seen one episode of Rooster, so don't tell me anything.
Oh, you didn't see episode 2.
in last
Okay.
night. No.
All right. Well, okay, great. That's fine. There's really not much spoilers. There's not much to spoil in episode 2.
I would assume not.
It's more of the same, I would say, and a slight continuation of the fallout of the ending.
Yeah.
Of episode 1. I'll just leave it at that. But really, there's not much to spoil. The only thing I would spoil here, if it's considered a spoiler at all, is that by the end of episode 2, Rooster indeed is going to be a permanent fixture on campus, which of course we know
can see that coming
from watching the trailer to the show. So not much of a spoiler. And of course, we know why. It's because of what happened at the end of episode 1. So nothing to spoil there at all. And more of the same awkward dynamic, this kind of romance between him and Daniel Deadweiler is continuing a little bit more of everything. Very much like the type of Bill Lawrence formula, like Shrinking, if you think about it, where you have very much the setup of the situation in episode 1. And then we just kind of go with those vibes for multiple seasons after that. But tell me what you thought of that first episode of Rooster.
It exceeded my expectations by quite a bit. I thought it would be just kind of something to pass the time. I'm pretty sure I watched it while I was eating lunch. Traditional sitcom-y kind of format. So I really was surprised by how much I loved it. The dialogue is great. The actors are great. It's like you said, it's a Bill Lawrence show, and you have the John McGinley character who was in Scrubs, right? So nice to see him again, as well as some other actors that I've never seen before, which was nice. And I thought that the dialogue was great, but also there was a lot of physical comedy.
Yes.
That I really appreciated. And I thought the plot was a little bit more novel than I was expecting. Yeah. I was expecting kind of just a contrivance to set up why the Steve Carell character needs to be on this college campus, which it does, but there was much more nuance to the plot than I expected.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of this so far too. Episode 2, not as strong as episode 1 in general. Not surprising.
By the way, so many laugh out loud moments too in episode 1. Yeah. Really, literally sitting alone in my apartment laughing out loud.
I agree 100%. I was it way exceeded my expectations. I'm still watching Shrinking. I've caught up on Shrinking in the past couple of weeks. I think we've discussed it briefly. And it's the laugh out loud moments, the kind of like awe moments are still there for me with Shrinking, but the laugh out loud surprising moments are not so much there. And I loved seeing
this last episode of Shrinking had a great throwaway line though.
Which one?
When they're at the gravesite with the marshmallows and I don't remember any of the characters' names, but they're doing the marshmallow thing in honor of Tia.
She almost
and the revenge. One guy almost chokes, and the attorney says she almost got you back.
Yes. This was a weird episode, by the way, of Shrinking.
So heavy.
Yeah. Yes. Very. I mean, first of all, very heavy, but the fact that it's so lighthearted. When this is first question I have for you, is this the 1-year anniversary? Has this all happened in 1 year? They said
this is her second birthday since she passed.
Second birthday. Okay.
So I guess at a minimum, it's a year and a month.
Right.
Maximum could be, I don't know, almost 3 years.
Could be 2 and change. Yeah, that makes a little more sense, like 2.5 years or something like that. Because I misunderstood that is it 1 year? I forgot. Because
the daughter forgot the first one, and so she remembered this one.
Oh, good point. Forgot the first one. Okay, that makes perfect sense now. So yeah, in my head, I was seeing that as only a year for some reason. But that makes perfect sense. That at least it's 2 years, or could be even more than 2 years, given it's a birthday and not the actual date that she passed. But I thought it was a little strange to be this chipper about things, although people process things differently. But that it is interesting that people have this much, have distanced themselves this much from the tragedy of the situation at this point. But of course, ending on a very dark note, which we're not going to spoil here, but a very dark ending to that episode.
I would think that someone in that situation could grieve for, I don't know, up to 5 years without anyone questioning why they haven't snapped out of it.
not for nothing, but how it's funny that these people are always talking about how not put together and how messy they are. And they are messy in very lovable ways. I love this show for the fact that these really horrible things resolve themselves because, and this is going to dovetail with our conversation to DTF. What I really loved about this episode of DTF is as if saying like, everybody's just kind of messy. And if you really just drill into anyone's messiness, nothing has like a really clean narrative that you can put into a TV show, for example. But the thing that's kind of beautiful about Shrinking is that they take all that messiness and everybody just kind of accepts their messiness. And they're like, yeah, I'm messy in a different way. And they kind of accept each other. So in a way, it's almost like a fantasy of how we can all be more mentally healthy by accepting our limitations, which of course we often are not able to. And get over things. For example, like we basically had family members visiting this very week because it was my wife's birthday. And we've had so many conversations just about how really mundane things that people are absolutely incapable of getting over after a lifetime.
Yes.
And then at the same time, I'm literally catching up on Shrinking, being like, these people are getting over the worst things that could possibly happen to them. And
yes.
For the most part, they're still dealing with them, obviously, but are still dealing with them in a healthy and positive way. And I'm like, I know people who are like dealing with like, this person took this heirloom I really loved. I'll never talk to this sibling again. I'm like, well, that's a very unhealthy way to deal with things. But it is, once again, it does feel like Shrinking is a bit of a fantasy. And Rooster is as well. But I do love that, Shrinking at least sets a model for how we can healthily deal with these differences. And Rooster's in that vein as well, but very much so. Like, something really catastrophic happens at the end of that first episode. And again, like very much in the Bill Lawrence way, everybody kind of comes with a way to forgive themselves, even if it is in a way to just be like, I'm big enough to forgive you, which in and of itself is character development. So it's enjoyable, very enjoyable so far. And episode 2, not as hilarious as episode 1. I agree with you. I was so surprised with episode 1 of Rooster, where I laughed out loud so many times. And the timing was impeccable. The chemistry of the cast was so good. And like I said, episode 2, not as great as episode 1, but still very fun. Another thing that's a very big difference, stark difference between episode 1 and 2, by the way, Sona, is episode 1, I guess you spend a lot of money on that pilot, has every single song in it is like a
oh my gosh, the music was so good. Yes.
80s. I mean, they're like playing like New Order, they're playing like Joy Division, they're playing The Cure, they play like all these big 80s songs that probably are all expensive. And the theme song, the new theme song, is by Michael Stipe, like the first song he's put out since REM, a decade now practically. So it is, quite the package musically there. Episode 2 is like, it's just TV music that has 80s vibes. And I think there's one needle drop in the whole entire episode. So they definitely scaled back the spending on episode 2.
After the first episode, I was like, can I stream this soundtrack on Spotify? This is amazing.
I'm sure someone's made a playlist by now, I'm sure. So yeah, fun stuff, and we'll keep sampling it. Oh, and by the way, some news on the ratings front that HBO announced that this was a huge debut, the biggest comedy debut for any show they've had. And I think it actually propped up the ratings for DTF St. Louis as well, because the ratings for DTF St. Louis from week to week went up 12%. Part of that, I think, was the premiere of Rooster. Part of it might be word of mouth, because from our podcast downloads, I would say that the premiere week for our coverage of DTF was just below average, I'd say, right? But over the course of the week, it was picking up steam, and then it picked up even more. The second episode was stronger. So I do feel like the show is picking up steam ratings-wise. And I think I know why, because unlike episode 1 and episode 2, where I was kind of like, how do they make this into a season of TV? Now at the end of episode 3, and I can't wait to get your opinion of this, I thought this was the best episode so far.
Agree. Totally.
And now I'm like, oh, I want to see more of these characters.
Yes,
Like,
the idea of delving into everybody's backstory and seeing some other perspective on what their life was before we got to the current day is really much more interesting than I would have expected it to be.
I agree. And this episode, which was called, what was this episode called?
I want to say Go-Getter, but I could be
Go-Getter, yes. It's either Go-Getter or The Go-Getter. So yes, absolutely. Right. And but it could have been called Everybody Loves Floyd.
It was so great. Yeah.
Yes. And you really see why everybody loves this character, right? In this particular episode. So a beautiful
And by the way, speaking of laughing out loud, this episode put the comedy and the dramedy. I definitely laughed out loud a few times during this episode.
There were a couple, I don't know which one specifically you want to shout out, but the whole Floyd talking about the whole hip thrusting thing where it's like, well, he tried to go for my butt and then I jerked away, but then I didn't want him to think that I withdrew the butt, but then I didn't want him to think that I was judging him. So then I put the butt back and then he thought I was thrusting. So then he started thrusting.
I'm laughing all over again. See, it was really well done.
The minutia of the description of it, he's trying to explain, like, breaking it down in his own mind, like how they got into that circumstance was so hilarious.
And just the premise was hysterical, that it was a picture of David Bowie that he didn't recognize. I didn't either, by the way. And he found himself on a date with a guy and just decided to go with it.
Well, what's so funny about that, by the way, I didn't shout it out last week's episode because I didn't know if it would be some kind of spoiler. So I didn't even mention it. But I see from a distance this picture, Modern Love, and I'm like, is that a woman? I didn't even think about it. But then when they have it blown up on the screen and on the profile you see the bubble that has the face in close up. And I said, oh, that's David Bowie. And then, of course, the song, I mean, the profile is Modern Love, right? The David Bowie song. So I'm like, oh, that is a guy, because he's using David Bowie as an icon, as his emoji or whatever. I'm not emoji, I'm talking like his profile picture, right? And the profile is called Modern Love, right? Modern Love, David Bowie, right? So I'm like, oh, that they're using this David Bowie icon. So that's, but so funny in this episode and just so Floyd, now that we kind of are starting to understand Floyd's vibes, where he acts so nonchalant when the guy walks in, like, hey, how are you? And he goes outside and he's like, can you look at this picture?
And even then, it says so much about his character, because I thought when he left, oh, he's going to try and leave the date, right? Even though we kind of know that's not what happened from previous episodes. But no, he's just doing his due diligence on whether this was a reasonable mistake for him to make.
But what's sad about it, but by the way, this is what is suddenly really coalescing for me on the show. In the very first episode, I had said that there was there's people are talking about how funny, and not us specifically on this podcast, but I've heard reactions in other podcasts where people go like, oh, this is so outlandish. This whole thing is so hilarious. And I'm like, this is funny, definitely funny in points. But the vibes I got from episode 1 were like very tragic. And as a matter of fact, because I was feeling this tragedy to the situation, I actually worried that I'm like, are we headed out I had speculated, are we just going to find out that this is Floyd committing suicide, which would be very sad.
Yeah.
So I actually suspected maybe that's where we're going, because I just get this real sad vibe. And I got to tell you, as funny as this episode was, the funniest of the three, that it is also the saddest one, because what I started getting from all of this is all these people are like not able to be happy in their circumstance. And they're just trying to find something, and like that thing, these people are just all not happy. And maybe this wasn't even an intentional murder, but it led to tragedy because of all this, sadness in the circumstance. It makes me feel even more melancholic about this. And a perfect example of that is exactly what you're saying. He goes back in there to talk to this guy and kind of let him down easy, or just kind of say well, I'm just going to finish talking to him and then move on because I don't want to hurt his feelings or something. And he ends up unloading on him all his marital problems because he just doesn't have anyone else to talk to. Even that is just so kind of tragic in its own way.
I don't think it's necessarily that he has no one else to talk to, but I think the story about why Peter Sarsgaard, I can't remember the character name, chose David Bowie and how he felt like he didn't fit anywhere resonated with him in a way that he felt comfortable sharing it. So I do think he could have talked to at least a couple of other people that we see in this show, but he chose this person because there was that connection.
He can talk to Clark too, actually. So although I don't know.
That's what I'm saying.
Once again, it's hard to know the time. Oh, no, I guess I do know the timeline. I take that back. I was going to say, it's hard to know the timeline if this is when him and Clark get really close, but that's not true at all, because then they're in the gym in the next scene and he's telling him everything, right? So he does have this closeness with other people. So I should take that back.
But to your point, I do agree. This has a very dark underbelly of suburbia kind of feeling to it. Yeah. And I will say, while I did find those scenes to be laugh out loud that we talked about, it was really interesting to me what they did with the scenes between, and I've looked up the cast list now so that I don't refer to actor names, and I will try and go with character names. Clark and Carol.
Yes.
Those sex scenes were rough.
Yes.
Like, I understand what they were going for and they achieved it, but it was very uncomfortable for me just to watch it.
Let's leave that for a little bit later in the conversation, because I really want to talk about, maybe primarily want to talk about what is going on with Carol for real. They're trying to set her up as like this conniving femme fatale, but that's not my read on everything. And if you have my read on it, it once again makes this a very sad series of events. So, but let's touch on a couple other things before we get there. But I do definitely want to probably primarily talk about her and those sex scenes and how they interact with what's happening with her.
Can I touch on one thing that will just take a second, but I keep forgetting to mention it? The Kevin Kline pools. What's that about?
Oh, great point. So we've gotten feedback on this episode. So one of the things, this is one of the more minor things, is that we got commentary from Ed. Thanks, Ed, for reaching out. And I have read your article, by the way. I'll give you my commentary on it. That's just between me and Ed. But anyway. But Ed used to live in St. Louis, one of our frequent emailers. And he mentioned that he loves this detail of Kevin Kline here. He says most of this does not feel like St. Louis to him. However, he loves the Kevin Kline detail because Kevin Kline apparently is one of the most famous people from this area, and people love, that him as a claim to fame. So apparently there are like Kevin Kline middle school or whatever. So this is like a little inside joke about St. Louis.
Okay, that's interesting. Good to know.
But in general, he says this is pretty nondescript. It does not feel like St. Louis. Although maybe that's the point too, when you think about the fact that they're really not in St. Louis. They're kind of like on the fringes of St. Louis. And maybe this is just generically a suburb with a couple of little details. No one's trying to do a Midwestern accent, although I guess a Midwestern accent is kind of like a generic American accent. Anyway.
Yes, I agree.
Okay, a couple of things based on feedback. Speaking of, I did want to touch base on this. A couple of more details that came in from our listeners. We'd love to hear from you guys. Thank you so much for correcting us, even.
Yes.
That's perfect as well.
All feedback is good feedback.
Perfectly. Yes, I completely agree. Two pieces of feedback that I think you're really going to enjoy. Sona, one I've shared with you already, which is the idea of these, do we have ASL interpreters at concerts? Apparently this is a thing. And there's been some very viral videos. Probably the inspiration for writing this was probably some of these viral videos, which you should look up. Just look in ASL concerts. And one of them is, I think it's Waka Flocka is performing. And he is really loving how into the music the ASL interpreter is. And he like goes over and starts performing with her. It's very fun. But my favorite of these is the Beyonce interpretive dance that goes along with the ASL gentleman, who is like an older, chubbier, not the body shame at all. He's in appropriate shape for his age, I would say, given someone who's approaching that age myself, but is really selling this Beyonce song, which is a lot of fun. And very much what they're riffing on here in this, specifically in last week's episode.
Yeah, good to know. And I am going to look out for it at the next concert that I attend, because I feel like I have attended so many concerts and I have never noticed it. But maybe I'm just being tunnel vision as to what is relevant to me.
Based on my research, by the way, Sona, this might be why haven't seen it and you haven't seen it, even though you attend these concerts, is you may want to look to the side of the stage, but apparently there is like an ASL area. So you would probably sit closer to that person, but I think it's not part of the general seating. So you probably
I see.
But I think if you look for this person, you'll probably see them at the side of the stage.
Okay, now I know.
Oh, and the other thing, Sona, very importantly, from last week's episode was the commentary we made about like, why is she making them repeat these?
Yes, I read something online about this. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So we heard back from someone on Spotify. Thank you so much for reaching out to us. Like as I mentioned, we love your feedback. That I had missed this, but in one of and maybe this is where the show might work better as a binge, by the way, possibly. Also, given the fact it's only 7 episodes. But I think in the previous episode, of course, she is constantly listening to the self-help tapes. And in the previous episode, the first episode of the season, she had been listening to it. And one of the things that is said when you want to take control of a situation is you ask the person to repeat what they said or speak louder. It's a way to interrupt them and take control of the conversation. So that is very important character development, as we see when she makes Floyd repeat, I love you. And of course, what she does to when she's being questioned and she gets uncomfortable is her way of taking control of the situation.
I will say, first of all, I appreciate that detail and thanks to the person that pointed it out. Second, I will say, I don't think she's executing it necessarily in the most effective way, because it does seem like she has a hearing issue.
Right. Well, I think that's character as well, but she's just repeating something she heard on a tape.
Yeah. And third, I will say, I liked our theory a lot better, that she's slowly losing her hearing.
Yes, I do too. I do too.
She can't hear.
I do. I prefer that as well. Like if I had just had that interpretation for the whole series, it would have just made Floyd even more lovable, by the way.
Yes, it would.
Oh, another thing that's strange here, we talk about the things that do seem like a little bit out of time, not completely out of time. They have smartphones and hookup apps and stuff like that. So that's not 20 years ago. But one thing that was such a hilarious detail this week is this idea of him saying like, well, you know what, when I was trying to do all this self-improvement stuff and your mom was trying to help me, he's talking to his stepson, which they have all the scenes between them are great this week.
So great.
And he says that, she got me this program called Excel, and she had the spreadsheet, and then I kept track of my activities every day. He talks about Excel like it's this completely weird. Have you ever heard of this? This is not 1995. Everybody if you don't have Excel, everybody has like Google Sheets that you could just literally, with a Google email address, you can create a spreadsheet. And I create spreadsheets all the time and not just for work. I mean, obviously, but I mean, like, I made one for my wife's going on a camping trip with the Girl Scouts this weekend. And we like kept the spreadsheet with everybody's fees and, communication points and everything. And we shared the document. I just feel like this is part of everyone's day-to-day life. The idea that he's like, have you heard of this program Excel? Like Excel's been around for over 30 years.
Yeah. Not only that, and maybe this is different because this is set in 2018, but this feels like this particular purpose, you should use a habit tracker app.
Yes. Well, I don't, that would be something, honestly, that would feel like maybe that's a little more techie. But the idea of like, have you heard of this spreadsheet thing? Kids in high school, I'm pretty sure, are using spreadsheets every single day. But let's use it as a springboard to talk a little bit about Floyd in general and Floyd with, his stepson. Again, this is where the show is starting to reveal what it's trying to do. And I really appreciated it this week, where we are like now seeing things from a different perspective, and where I was like, I'm not sure this is enough to sustain a series. I loved all of this, right? Like you suddenly see Floyd, and we already knew that, well, not everything is as it appears, but then we see that so many of these misunderstandings is just like Floyd trying to be a good guy. Yeah. And then of course, surprising you with his own, like, of course, surprising us last week with not much of a surprise because I kind of anticipated it, that he used to be in shape and he was in this Playgirl magazine. So that's a little bit of a surprise. But then here that you see him having this really awkward, really difficult, the relationship with the stepson seems to be like completely disconnected. And then we see them like the stepson who's doesn't really like going to school. I don't think he's on a spectrum here or whatever, but he's just a little bit off. But then the fact that he ties in his conversations with modern love with the, by the way, really quickly, love that modern love's job is he is a skateboarding magician.
Yeah. Hypnotist.
I don't want to be hypnotized on skates, by the way. Definitely not. Seems like some kind of
bizarre
insurance problem. But the conversation he ends up having where, like not really knowing how to fit in. And he's like, I didn't really fit in. And then how that segues into the conversation with the son. And then, of course, that they're not going to go to the therapy session, which, of course, we saw in the very first episode, the very first scene, I think, of the whole entire series. And that this is better, and how the stepson actually does rely on him, right? Like you see that he actually is kind of at sea at the end when he says it's just him and his mom again, which apparently has not had, she may see things as like, I do what I need to do to protect my son, but there seems to be a lack of understanding from her side. And I think he did have that with Floyd. And of course, that's no longer the case. What did you think about the whole gymnastics? I do this every day. Good piece of advice, by the way. First of all, Floyd can do that. Good for him, although it's special effects. Not special effects, but it's like, they swapped in a stuntman. But still the fact that, which is true, right? Is like, if you just do an activity every day, you can do it. You could do a cartwheel every day if you just keep doing a cartwheel every day, even if you're 50 years old. If you've never done a cartwheel, then you'll probably injure yourself trying to do a cartwheel at that age.
Yeah, I thought
Floyd's
that was
doing that every day, by the way. He should be in better shape, I think.
It's just a 30-second routine.
True. It's a lot of physical exertion, though, in that 30 seconds.
Super hard, all upper body and core. Yeah, I loved the unexpectedness of that, first of all, but
Yes.
also the intro to it where the stepson thinks they're talking about hostile architecture, which is a valid talking point all on its
Yes.
own. We have a lot of hostile architecture here in New York City. But he says, oh, no, but that's not why I brought you here.
Yes. By the way, Floyd's method of communication could be a problem he has in general. That last week we saw the same thing where he's like, usually Peyronie's disease comes from some kind of physical, what am I trying to say? Like trauma, right? So let me tell you about the physical trauma to my penis. Well, I rescued this kid in the middle of the street. Oh, wait, I didn't get around to the point I was trying to make. We'll get around to that later. And same thing here. It's like, can you believe this? Look at this horrible, the way that we make homeless people feel terrible about themselves. By the way, I use that as a pommel horse.
Yes.
Okay, not the most direct way to get to the point. All right, let's talk about Carol here, because I think this is the heart of the episode. I actually thought this was going to be all Carol all the time, even though and this is one thing that still is a little weird for me on the show, and maybe wouldn't be as much of an issue if I was watching this as a binge. It's the fact that the show structurally is doing something different every single week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In the first episode, it's like this is like a true crime. And once again, maybe this is intentional. I just haven't seen the shape of the show yet. This is like a true crime documentary, even shot like a true crime documentary, where it's like we see a couple of main characters. We see the cursory version of their lives, just the brief summary in the true crime podcast or news article or whatever. Then we end up on an dead body middle of the episode. And then we have a police procedural second half, right? And then like we can't see anything beyond the surface. That's the episode 1. Episode 2, it's like, we're actually going to see everything we see in episode 2, other than the police POV, is just Clark's POV. It's just what he knows. And that's all we're seeing. We're seeing his version of the story, and we're not privy to other POVs. And now in the third episode, it's changed again. We are seeing things, for example, when Clark runs outside and is like, hey, can you tell me, is this a man or a woman? Like, that is stuff that we have to take as like, this literally happened, because that's not someone's POV. Floyd is dead. So that is literally just presentational. So the show, again, has changed how it's telling its story. And it's a little confusing because you think about the opening moments of this show. We are, again, now, and this was my presumption, we're now going to see the story from Carol's point of view because when we meet her, right? So we're like, aha, now this is going to be her version of the story. But that's not what we're seeing. We're starting to see the story being told from like a third person perspective, which is a little confusing to me. I still got to say that but maybe that's the intention of the show, is that little by little, it will allow itself to tell the story in full. And that's the transition. This is a transitional episode, let's say.
But I think it's a fair point that you kind of have to reframe your mindset
Constantly,
for each episode,
right,
because you're expecting to see information presented in a certain way, and then they deviate from that.
Exactly. So it's this thing that changes from each time you iterate through the story. And again, it's almost like they transition from the previous style to the new style. In the beginning, like I said, you see Carol, but a couple of points. First of all, holy cow, 4 go-getters. This is mostly ice. I thought one of these things was a bladder buster. This thing, how many times did she go to the bathroom this day? Not
just bladder. It feels like something called the go-getter would maybe have a lot of fiber in it. I don't know.
Fiber? Oh, I was thinking the go-getter could be a lot of like caffeine or something, which would be like
maybe all. I mean, if you have a lot of caffeine, you also could have bathroom issues.
That's a good point. She must have used the bathroom many times. And none of these are free, by the way. No tip, though, by the time she gets to the third one. Understandably, by the way. $8 for this drink? $8? $8 in 2018? Like, that's like a $20 drink nowadays.
It is very big, but yes.
Then why don't you get a smaller one, lady, if you're going to have 4 of these things? But anyway, we go circling back to a very specific point where you had mentioned it last week, where when detective...
Well, according to Google, by the way, go-getter smoothie ingredients are mango, kale, matcha powder, orange juice, apple juice, bananas, oats, and ice, if Google is reliable here.
So mostly fruit, maybe some fiber in there, to your point. With all that fruit. Kale too, yeah.
And oats.
Right.
You're going to be in the bathroom.
Good thing she probably has it to herself. But
when
then
you have 4 of these, I mean.
You might be afraid.
Not just saying one, but.
So she did all of that for the purposes of meeting up with.
And it makes sense now that it was so memorable to the girls. It's not that they really remembered just the single deviation. That lady camped out in the Jamba Juice and kept ordering the same smoothie over and over.
Exactly. So the Detective Plum was where I was going back to, exactly what you mentioned. You called it out last week when she's investigating, talking to the girls at the Jamba Juice. And of course, they're like, nope, there was that one time, which ... and this is the ... right? That not only did she buy something off label, or off her brand, but that she went and bought 4 of them. So of course she was stalking the place out. This is verified by her credit card transactions, which of course is hilarious. They didn't even call this out, but I assume, when you look at your credit card transactions, it'll tell you like the name of the restaurant, or sometimes we'll have like an abbreviated code for the thing you actually purchased. You can imagine if this is like Go-Getter, like GGT or something like that, and they go through her credit card statements and she literally goes there every day. And every single time she's in there, it's the other drink. And now this to go get her 4 times. That is a very damning piece of evidence that she used just stalking the circumstance. All right. So let's talk about Carol, which I think is going to be probably the biggest part of this conversation. And I have so many questions as to what might be going on with her. I think what the show is trying to mislead us into believing, and then another way to read some of these things as well. The first note I took, by the way, Sona, last night as I was watching this, and part of the tragedy of this whole situation is that it starts to feel like this whole entire outcome may possibly have been avoided, or at least minimized, if it hadn't been for overwhelming credit card debt.
Maybe so, yeah.
A couple of things.
Gotten that job in Chicago.
Yes, exactly. Right. She was trying, he was, I assume, complying with the spreadsheet, but it didn't get him all the way there.
Yeah. He had that accident.
That's true. The car hit his penis.
Yeah.
Or that's the theory we're going on right now. A couple of things. So one is, of course, something that I specifically said last week, which was that the show, again, as it continuously makes us reevaluate our expectations or our assumptions, the presentation, if it's true or not, that the relationship had dried up, right? That she's like, I still love my husband. I want to make it work out with Floyd. The text messages end at that point. And then very shady, right? Like, obviously the show is putting its thumb on the scale, trying to make us believe that she cut things off and then that drove him to murder Floyd.
Mm-hmm.
That may very well be the overall shape of the story. But of course, this whole episode makes her, in one reading of things, be way more responsible for what happened. A, she's the one who obviously masterminded the meeting with Clark in the first place at the Jamba Juice. But more importantly, I wonder if Jamba Juice is doing well. Is this the type of show that makes people crave Jamba Juice? I'm not sure, but obviously they are participating, or at least allowed this to be the case. Product placement. Interesting choice of product placement. But of course, the show is now putting a thumb on the scale, saying that given the timeline we see here, that after he is working out with Floyd, the day that Floyd, we've seen in the previous episodes, tells him that he knows he's sleeping with his wife, and we assumed, well, this is only on one side of the relationship. Carol has cut things off, but that's not true at all. They're probably not texting as much intentionally to keep things on the down low, because it does seem to be explicitly that they're still hanging out, not only sexually having those meetups, but she's going for bike rides with him and talking about their financial issues and talking about Floyd in general and the relationship with Floyd. So obviously this continued beyond that point. So that specific point, how does that particular element, how does that make this a more complex interpretation of the events?
Yeah, well, I almost chimed in a minute ago when you said the show is making us think that these are the reasons Clark would kill Floyd. And I almost chimed in and said, or Carol is trying to make people think that these are the reasons Clark would kill Floyd. Because we definitely, the more we see of her, the more it seems like she is very calculating, especially with that final scene of the most recent episode where she tells her son, I always make sure we're taken care of.
And then what does that actually mean?
When you're talking life insurance, it can only mean one thing.
Perhaps. I have an alternate read on that, because where is this life insurance policies, which really comes down to, if there was an actual life insurance policy, then I think this is a very easy way to read the events we've seen here. I do have an alternate theory, but I'll save that one for later on.
Okay. I will say also, we have not seen much at all of Clark's wife.
Yes, that is the overhanging over all
and
of this.
That remains. Possibly next week's episode will be dedicated to her. Who knows?
Maybe. We thought that was going to happen. We're going to see more of her after last week's episode, but it hasn't been the case.
So theoretically, in the meantime, she has just been building resentment over these months.
I think that is absolutely the case. And and let's talk about that when we get to the very end, because there's something very pivotal that happens towards the very end of this episode, which I think maybe is touching on exactly on what you're talking about. But first of all, with Carol, something I just thought about, taking notes for this conversation that I hadn't connected the dots with before, but it's the idea that this sex fantasy role play between the two of them that seems to be, and maybe this is the first thing we discuss. So of course we see this very odd fixation he has, Clark, with being controlled, right? Being dominated.
Mm-hmm.
And then you think about the fact that in the first couple of episodes, she's been listening to a lot of these tapes. And what is this about? It's not just, you think you're listening to that and it's like, oh, she's really into self-help and she's trying to get ahead at work or something. But maybe she's listening to all those tapes as a way to be a better, she's basically like a light dominatrix. And I guess that she wants to understand control better, because the unifying theme of all of Clark's fantasies seem to be that he wants to surrender control, right? He's a robot that is being bossed around. He is in this submissive position, very awkward scene earlier on, like you mentioned. And so that there's this aspect of him wanting to be controlled. And then, of course, she's listening to tapes about how do you take control of a situation. So it's like she's, perhaps one way to read that is she's trying to be better at manipulating him, Clark, or maybe it's a way because she really is falling in love with him, or at least gets something out of this relationship that she doesn't get in other aspects of her life, and is trying to be better at performing that role. Just specifically on that point, do you have a read on that? What is she getting out of this relationship? Is she purely trying to manipulate Clark, or is this mutual?
Well, the self-help tape aspect isn't something that had occurred to me until just now, but I don't feel like she is super genuine in this relationship. I do think she's being calculating about it. And I think I might be remembering this wrong, but we hear so much about what Clark is looking for in these dream meetings. But didn't she say her dream was to be taken care of or to not have to worry about things or something like that?
Yeah, that's exactly what you're making me recall in this moment. That's one of the things that I really feel is distancing her from this circumstance. And maybe Clark is reading it as like, oh, I found someone who's getting off on this with me mutually. And maybe that's his interpretation because he wants that to be the case. But I got the exact same read from her. My read of this, she is not sexually getting off on this. She is like, I mean, she may enjoy the sex, but I'm saying
right.
She's not, this is not a...
It's kind of hard to enjoy from what we've seen, but yeah, maybe.
Well, it depends. Certain activities more than others, I'd say for sure. Yeah. But it seems like she is not into it, and she's not into providing this service for him. And exactly what you said, she's like, he's always talking about his sex fantasies, and it's as if he's trying to get her to be more open with him about that. And you're absolutely correct. She's like, I guess my fantasy is to be like financially okay, which seems to be that she's always directing the conversation. First of all, that's not really a sexual fantasy. Maybe it is actually. Maybe I'm not familiar with it, but it's possible that financial security maybe is erotic for some people. I don't know. But the possibility is that is something that's happening there. But I don't read it that way. I think that she's trying to take the conversation now that she has worked Clark in this way, and she thinks he's very financially successful. Another thing, totally forgot to bring up last week, she seems disappointed when she recalls the fact that he had lied about having this coastal explosives company or something.
Yeah. The Bangmaster.
The Bangmaster, exactly. So that he came up with this story that he is richer than he is and has this more cool and macho career other than just being Guy Smiley on the Weather Channel, which is something she specifically calls him. So maybe that is obviously there's some aspect of him that is dissatisfied with himself, and then he gets to role play. But it's interesting that when he gets to have the sexual role play, he actually wants to put himself into a submissive role, basically. So yeah, so it's just, and to your point, every time he's trying to get her to be open about that, what he actually gets from her is, I want financial security. Let me talk to you about life insurance. Let me talk to you about
so much life
credit card debt. So yeah, there's a way to read this where she simply saw him as someone who had money, and a way to, and again, it circles back to what you mentioned, perhaps that very final beat in the episode with the son, where she's like, I always figure out a way to provide for us. Maybe she just saw him as a financial mark. Clark, that is.
Yeah.
And what else do we see here about Clark that, I mean, obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, I'm not able to fully understand. I mean, if all the people he can find to, especially because he's interested in this hookup app, that he would find this sexual relationship with his best friend's wife. I mean, I guess they're not best friends at the time, but still, I guess initially it seems pretty much like he's not too close to this guy. He's only met him a few times. So I guess she seems far enough away. In my head, I'm thinking like the closeness of a relationship. Obviously, if you're looking for this outlet, maybe not your best friend's wife is not the best way to go about it. But it does seem to be, and this is kind of the happenstance of the show, I should say, that it's almost like he was attracted to her first. She came on to him. They maybe even started the sexual relationship. He just kind of knew this guy and then got closer to him, maybe on her goading. And then, of course, now he's like, I also really like that guy. And now this is a very awkward situation, obviously, for him.
Yeah, one thing that struck me throughout the episode, and maybe there is some question as to where these timelines overlap, is he's speaking with so much conviction about how much he loves Floyd. And
Right.
you can't help but in your head go, but you still had sex with his wife.
Right.
So I would like to think that two men who have such a close friendship would not feel comfortable betraying each other in that way.
Based on what the police officers say about their communication, it seems like the constant communication between him and Floyd does not begin. I mean, they knew each other earlier, obviously. That's how he met Carol in the first place. But it seems like their close relationship, the constant meeting at the gym and all that happened later on in the course of the relationship. So it's possible, to your point, that maybe he does have that negative feeling about himself in this circumstance. But of course, he maybe knew her better than he knew him initially. And then, of course, later on when they become very close friends, now he's like, wow, now I really feel like a jerk because I am having this relationship with your wife. But a detail that maybe you are accounting for, maybe not, is that it seems in my reading of things, again, we don't know exactly when these scenes are taking place. It seems like that moment where he tells him in sign language.
Yeah.
You know what? I take that back. I was going to say, it seems like in that moment where he's signing with him, that it is very early in their friendship, but that's not true because in this episode, Jason Bateman, Clark, his character, Clark, is just starting to learn how to sign. So for him to be proficient enough for them to have that communication, it is later on. So so if I'm going to, once again, resequence things, which I have to continuously do, they do go to the gym and work out now, but they're at the early part of that cycle. And this is, who knows, let's say a month later, when at least Clark is good enough at signing that he can understand what he's signing to him. Because he basically can say one phrase.
Yes.
Like, are you okay? Or whatever it was, do you need help? Or something like that. And is literally the one phrase he's learned. The I know you're sleeping with my wife is an advanced phrase for sure. Not one of the top 5 phrases you learn in signing. Okay, here's my theory that we can finally get to. And part of this is not because the Occam's razor, the obvious answer, has literally every single episode been deconstructed by the next episode. You think about what we see here in the episode. Carol, there is a way to read things, by the way, that she is making Clark fall in love with her, become this unique outlet for his sexual fantasies, have that dependency on her, only to then say, you can't be with me anymore. I still love my husband. Sorry. And that's like planting a seed in his mind. The only way I can have her is to get Clark out of the way. And obviously, if she has some kind of financial stake in the matter, like a life insurance policy, that would be yet another motivator, of course. And then, of course, they even add here that you're like, well, it doesn't seem like she has a life insurance policy. But then there's all these caveats where it's like he still has to pay alimony. He still has all this credit card debt.
The fortune teller, yes.
Yes, the fortune teller. Great joke, by the way, where it's like, how does she not know that you guys are going to break up? He's like, good question. So given all that it's almost like they're also planting a seed that even if there was no life insurance policy, or maybe he was in the process of signing a life insurance policy only to have an actual heart attack before then, that even if that was the case, that there still would be this possible motivation that just getting for him to die and for his debts to die with him also gets her off the hook since she's the breadwinner right now. Do you read that all the same way?
Yes, I think that's right.
But another way to read all of that, and here's my alternate theory, is that she actually wants Clark to help her improve her husband. So, for example, get this light amphetamine prescription so that he can lose weight. And maybe he takes that as a way to help him lose weight. He is not, by the way, my theory originally that he may have been committing suicide that day at the pool house. He is working out. And by the way, all these ideas that like, oh, maybe he's not the one who brought the Bloody Mary mix. He's drinking the Bloody Mary mix. He has the magazine with him. Maybe the magazine is like, kind of like, let me use this as inspiration. Like I used to look like that. Let me try to work out to get my body back into that condition again. So I don't know why the face is scratched out. Still a big question mark, by the way. But even the police officers specifically call that out in the show. So I think that does matter in some way. But he's working out big. And by the way, maybe he just gets up early in the morning and maybe they work out at the gym early in the morning. Maybe the gym was closed for some reason. And this is where they're meeting at the pool house. Because remember that Clark has to get up early to go to work he calls out the fact that he wakes up early in the morning, which is the reason that him and his wife are kind of like on different schedules. And maybe the reason also that he never sees her. Or we never see her through him.
Well, theoretically, some of the time that he's at this motel, he could see her. But
he could easily be seeing her and his family, who's neglecting as well, for sure. There's no doubt about that. But the question mark there, of course, is that maybe they were just getting together to work out. Maybe this was a regular schedule for him. And again, they're just like, oh, this is suspicious because this is the day he died. And who put that drug in his drink? Maybe he did it. And why did Clark order these drugs for him? Because she's saying we can't afford them. So maybe he's just like, hey, I'll buy him the ED drugs. I'll buy him this amphetamine. And then he's just we may very well see in the next episode that he's just like giving them to them. Here you go. And of course, he's not going to say that to the police officers being like, oh, I did buy them for him. That it's going to make him look even more suspicious. But it may very well be the case that that's exactly what he did. And of course, even that scene where Carol says, and I want you to do all these things for him, but don't tell him that I'm involved in any way, which of course is a way where one way to read that is that she is setting him up and setting up Clark. And this is all a big scam. But another way to read that is that he doesn't want me nagging him anymore, but I want him to get better. So if this comes from you, this would be better for him. And of course, then you take all that into consideration. But of course, she needs something too, not just making Clark's life better. But what if part of this also is these insurance premiums are so expensive, and it may turn out that there is no insurance policy, but maybe Clark is simply cutting her a check every single month for these insurance premiums, but it's not. It's just for her to help pay her bills. What do you think of all that?
Okay. Two things I want to know. One is a non sequitur to what you just said,
sure.
But I just want to put a marker down that we've now seen basically everybody riding that recumbent bicycle.
Yes, that's another very important point. Yes.
So those were just being handed out to whoever felt like taking a spin.
It's the same bike, though. It's the same bike that he bought for his wife.
Yeah. He's just loaning it out to everybody.
Exactly. Yeah. Everybody else gets to ride it except for his wife.
Okay. So that was one thing. The other thing is, yes, I understand everything you're saying. Here's the thing for me. The premise on the life insurance thing is so bad. I think he would just have peace of mind. I think it would just bring him peace of mind and he would somehow be healthier because of this. I have life insurance. Do you have life insurance?
We do not. I mean, I have it through my work, actually.
Okay. So I have life insurance and I never give it a second thought, except for like, yes, if something god awful happened to me, knock wood, my family will be taken care of. Does it affect my day-to-day life and decision-making? Not one single iota.
Oh, I agree with that.
So her whole idea was so stilted. Oh, the high cholesterol and the this and the that. And he would just feel better, more peace of mind with life insurance. That your habits are going to lead to an untimely death and your family's taken care of. Yes, but that's it. It's not going to somehow improve what you're doing day to day in your life. The fact that you have life insurance, none of that connects for me.
Oh, I think that she's lying on its face. Her excuse is not legitimate. But saying
why is the question?
Why is she harping on this? Oh, well, that's the key, though. I don't think that she is saying that I want this. I mean, first of all, the show is definitely trying to make you very suspicious of this fact, for sure.
Of course.
But the question I have on that is, if she's saying he needs this, of course, we're very suspicious of what she's actually saying. But my reading of it is, imagine she is saying to him, I think it would be better for everybody's peace of mind if we had this life insurance policy. But she's not actually buying a life insurance policy because she doesn't actually think that he's going to die. And it doesn't seem like she bought one. I could be wrong about that, by the way. Maybe it turns out there was like something that was in process and just hasn't popped up yet. But so that is definitely, I'm open to that possibility. But if it turns out there was no life insurance policy or plan for one, then I wouldn't be surprised that it all turns out that she's simply saying like, here's the monthly premium. Could you throw me some cash to pay for this? Because she just needs a little extra cash. And that she might be milking.
You think it has nothing
Clark.
to do with a setup. It's just a way to get cash.
Correct. I think that this is, again, that the show has multiple times said that this is so like a clear cut explanation for this. And then it's going to subvert it in the very next episode or soon thereafter.
Oh, by the way, also on the life insurance policy.
Yeah.
Sorry. I just don't want to forget to interject this. The logistics of it didn't make sense. You have to have a medical exam to get life insurance.
Right. So, yeah. So, but this is part of the reason that I think that she's just asking him to give her cash.
So maybe you're right. There was never any life insurance because Floyd would certainly know if he was having a medical exam for life insurance.
Exactly. So you see, that's why I'm kind of suspicious
but
of all of this.
But then the drugs?
Well, the drugs are just, it's first of all.
I also don't understand the logistics, by the way. How do you get these drugs prescribed for you?
I mean, this is a fake drug.
Maybe an online thing.
Right. Online pharmacy. Exactly. But the thing is that this is a very light drug where they're supposedly they're saying that this thing is even hard to detect in your system. And I Googled the name that they have, and it's not an actual thing. So I assume it is a type of like a light amphetamine. And if it is given the name of it, but if Aphazite or something, some fake name, but if this is like a light amphetamines are often prescribed for weight loss. So I was picturing, is he just taking a light amphetamine, the fen in the past, where people would use it to lose weight, and maybe he's just drinking it himself, but maybe the prescription went through Jason Bateman's insurance company for the cost of it, and getting an ED prescription now, like if this is an online pharmacy, like you were saying, I mean, it's like a 2-second consultation to get one of these prescriptions. And weight loss is one of these online services they provide. As a matter of fact, it's on the same prescription, right? The ED drugs and the weight loss. I mean, I'm calling it a weight loss drug, this amphetamine, right?
Yeah. Okay, I'm coming around. Now that I'm really talking about the logistics of it, yes, it does make sense that he's just been giving her cash.
Even if it turns out she actually had an insurance policy made in his name because she was actually worried about this, because she's so stressed out about these different health conditions he has and such, that we're like saying he's about to drop dead. He does not seem, I mean, if he can do that gymnastics routine every day, even though
he's breathing hard after though. But
right.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. My point is that he definitely should lose some weight, but he's not, he does not seem to be on death's door is the point. Although I could be wrong about all that too, because he may have just simply had a heart attack when he was working out that morning, and the amphetamines might have put him over the top. But as far as like, I don't see an insurance policy claim, and I'm open to the fact that I could be 100% wrong about that. It could turn out, oh, we found the insurance policy. It was under this other name, or it was in process, or it didn't activate for 6 months, and coincidentally he died, which would make her very, very suspicious. But I have a feeling she just wants to ask him to give her a check. Yeah.
It is making sense, because also what I was wondering is, with all of these health conditions she's talking about, the and at his age, to buy life insurance now is not going to be inexpensive. Like that would be a pretty high premium when you come in with those conditions at this age.
Well, I mean, I honestly think that she is making him sound more unhealthy than he maybe actually is. And exactly to your point, imagine being in your mid-50s and having all these pre-existing conditions and being overweight. And she makes him sound much sicker than I actually do believe that he is.
Okay.
And if that's the case, imagine she's like, I really would feel better with life insurance, but life insurance now is like $300 a month, right?
Yeah.
And now so we're not talking about like I remember when I was first starting out my first job, speaking of having life insurance, which I don't. I mean, I do get it to my work automatically, but that's pretty much the only life insurance I've had. But I remember when I was first starting out right out of college at my first job, and it's like, if I wanted to double my life insurance, it was like $2 or $3 per paycheck. Right?
Oh, it's when you're in your 20s, it's like candy, like they're giving it out. Yeah,
exactly. So my point is like, yeah, that is just going to go up every single year. And to now where it probably is doubling my life insurance, that would probably cost a fortune. So exactly the same thing. So I think that is an excuse where she goes, I've been looking at these policy plans And, because of all these pre-existing conditions and his age, and because he has a dependent, man, the insurance policy is this much. And now, of course, she has become the sexual outlet for Clark, who's never had this before in his life. And she's training herself to be a dominatrix, basically, to fulfill his fantasies, to keep him on the hook so that she can say, by the way, so in other words, she's a prostitute, but not to shame her for that. But it is, again, adds to the kind of feeling I have of the sadness of the situation, that when she's like, I always do what it takes to support the family, it could include sex work.
Sure.
So anyway, that's my theory of the case. She is a somewhat willing sex worker. Half intentional, half, slipped into the...
Well, the life insurance thing definitely doesn't track. So I think you could be onto something.
Yeah. So we're curious to see. And imagine next week, after all this speculating, it's like, we found the life insurance policy. Whoops.
Yeah. The beneficiary is her sister that we never heard of. Yeah.
Oh, and I do want to circle back to the bike because it does touch on this inadvertently as well, as far as not the life insurance specifically, but the fact that every time we have like a new clue, and Occam's razor, the simple solution never is correct, is exactly that. Last week, it's just like, we've only sold 2 of these bikes and we sold them to the same guy. Dead to rights, buddy. And then we're just like, not only could someone else in the house have ridden the bike, but now we know he had Floyd ride the bike.
Yes.
We see Floyd ride the bike. We see her ride the bike with him. They're riding it together. We see, like, we haven't seen this where they actually go on a bike ride together. I don't think we've seen it explicitly, but there's like a flashback moment where they're saying, you were his friend. What kind of friends were you? And you see them like high-fiving each other while they're riding side by side. So it's like, everybody's ridden this bike. Yeah. I mean, Floyd takes the bike to his date.
Yeah.
So yeah, that this is not as rare as it would appear to be. And of course, the irony could be all of this. And my wife specifically says, I bought this for my wife, and my wife never wrote this, not one time. Well, maybe she wrote it one time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, a couple more things. One is the final moment, not the final moment, but the last bit of evidence that turns him around. But before we get to that, I just wanted to mention a weird detail here, which maybe is not unintentional. Maybe there's something that's going to be developed here, which is, have you noticed this theme of like androgyny in the show in general? That you have, one thing is you have Clark in this very, submissive position, let's say, but then he wants her to role play a more masculine type role, but she can't be too masculine. She has to still sound like a woman. So again, this androgyny, like the activity versus the presentation, that's an odd thing. We have the David Bowie, who from a distance looks like a woman and then turns out to be a man. That's another level of androgyny. And the last thing I thought about as I was taking this note down, as I was writing it down about it, I realized another bit of androgyny here is, I think about, and it made me laugh just remembering this particular visual in either the first or second episode, that there's the whole thing where a Clark, and by the way, we see this again in the trailer for next week. Not Clark, I'm sorry, Floyd is turned off by his wife in the Empire's outfit. And speaking of the androgyny of that, I love where you see just her legs, beautiful legs that she has, by the way, and they accentuate it multiple times throughout the course of the show. But he just sees her legs sticking out while she's like putting lotion or something on it. And he's getting a little frisky. Mm-hmm. And then she stands up in the umpire. So she's like half umpire, half sexy legs. And he immediately gets turned off. It was very funny, though, this idea that, like, just her legs sticking out, like she's some kind of half man, half beast. But in this case, she's like lower half is sexy legs, upper half is like burly umpire. But another combination male-female, imagery.
Interesting point. I hadn't thought about that.
So yeah, I just thought like it's funny that there's all these in-between characters represented here. But then, of course, the last thing, which again is my last key, no pun intended, to what the mystery might be about. And if there is some kind of funny business going on, is it Emily, whatever her name was?
Emmy, I think.
The key, right? So that's what it comes down to, is that this key that we see that Plum has been trying every key, every door, at every location she goes to see if this key works. She cannot find a lock for this key. And this is the thing that at first she shows it to him and he seems to like not fully suss out what it is and gets into very long-winded explanation defending himself. And then she shows him the key again. And it's like he realizes what the key is and he immediately shuts down the interview. I will not talk any further without a lawyer present. So it doesn't seem like he's trying to protect himself since he's been babbling the whole entire day. But again, if he recognizes the key's got to be, I mean, it could be Carol's key as well, right? So it's not like it's just Emily. But again, he obviously knows who it is. And whoever that is, he's trying to protect, I think.
I will just say that as an attorney, it was a relief to finally see him ask for a lawyer, which he should have done from the get-go, regardless of whether he is guilty or not. Very poor judgment on his part to not ask for an attorney. So I'm happy that they finally had that happen.
Yeah, I don't understand that at all, where he has rejected it multiple times, even as I like that he starts babbling to Plum when she's there alone. And she's like, I'm telling you right now, like, you should stop talking before the other detective is here. Like, you need to talk a lot less. And he needs to take that to heart. But to your point, yeah, it's bizarre that even if you're innocent, you don't know how some things you say might be, you know, may blow up in your face somewhere down the line. And like you said, just having your lawyer at your side, listening to what you're saying as you're saying it is minimally the safest thing to do. And the fact that he's just been like, nope, and that's crazy. He literally is calling up his wife at one point being like, I don't, and we see this in the previously on. He's like, I don't know what happened. I didn't hurt Floyd.
She ignores his call.
I don't understand what happened. He says, I'm sorry. He says, I don't understand what happened. And I didn't hurt Floyd. Those are the three things he says. And even if you're like, I do not understand how I look so guilty here. Is someone trying to set me up? Or even if it's just like, I didn't do anything and this is just happenstance and you're misreading everything. The idea that like, you are obviously misreading everything. I will not have a lawyer present with me is insane. It's a very, very bad choice. Especially, by the way, if you go in there and you're like, this is all a huge misunderstanding. Let me explain things to you. And then moment one, by the way, they start outlining the case against him. And he seems to realize like, oh my God, I seem really guilty. Let me explain myself. As soon as you're like, I seem really guilty. Let me explain myself. That's the moment. You definitely want a lawyer at your side. But yeah, I guess Clark isn't that bright, but at least he figured it out at this point. So, what did you make of that from a legal standpoint, by the way? The whole fact that the first time they question him, and I can't even remember how this happened though. So maybe you can refresh my memory as well. But first of all, the first time that Homer interviews Clark is in the police department, but in the common area.
It's like in the lobby of the building, sitting on those cubes. It's super weird.
Very strange. Yeah. Very strange location too, that this would be the entryway to a police department, but an odd location. And the fact that he didn't take him into a room to question him, maybe so his defenses would be down because it's like very informal, possibly. But then where does the pivot come from? He lets him go. When do they actually arrest him?
I think it's after they saw the text messages, right?
Because when they start going through all the text messages.
In that first interview,
in the profile, yes.
He has the order to get the phone. And so, yes, I think once they start, if I'm remembering correctly, once they start going through his phone, that's when they realize that they have enough to arrest him.
Yes. And then, of course, yeah, I mean, they pretty much have him dead to rights once they identify that the Tiger profile is his profile or paid for with his credit card anyway, even if it's not explicitly his. And that's one more thing to bring up too. I kind of touched on this last week that possibly the Tiger profile response is because of him feeling bad that Floyd has not gotten any additional responses on the app. And we see that at the end of this episode, right? Like he has no responses and he kind of feels a little upset about that. And then we also see later on where, you know, once again, the chronology of this almost certainly is after the fact, where he's like, oh, look, this guy messaged me, Tiger, and he seems like all happy about it. And it's possible, you know, that my reading of that, one possible reading of that was that he had messaged him just to make him feel, you know, give him a little more self-confidence. now I'm just thinking to myself, and then was that him trying to get in shape for that meeting? Maybe that motivated him to work out? I don't know. Interesting.
I don't know, but it also is interesting that he accidentally goes on one date with a guy and then is kind of like, I guess this is what I do now.
He's like, well, at least someone paid attention to me. Yeah, the pivot between the like, I wasn't expecting this, and then he might be seeking it out is interesting. So we're going to have to wait and see.
I admire the open-mindedness, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So who knows? I mean, that is still that is unexplained. But also, I would assume that they were like make it sound like he was hooking up on the app. It does not seem like he met anyone in between, right? So this is like his the next potential. And obviously, we see you had whatever 36 views and nobody messaged you, so it doesn't seem like it's happening on a daily basis, of course. So yeah, again, all of this is kind of sad for everybody involved. Yeah. And we do see a little bit of the actual night of, or day of, I should say morning of, when someone comes on the bike. We see it through the window. So that was the other thing too. There was a possibility that someone was there, but that maybe he took the bike himself. We've seen him ride the bike, but we actually see outside someone riding the bike, and then we hear a bang on the door. And we also know from the communications via the app that Tiger had planned to meet him there. But I mean, it could turn out to be Clark, right? It could be like Clark being like, by the way, I was the person who was messaging you. And he could just be like, I was trying to get you to feel better about yourself and work out. And I have to tell you this because this is a really messed up situation. I got to set things right. And then Floyd coincidentally has a heart attack and he's like, oh my God, I got to get out of here. And now he looks incredibly guilty, right? So it could just be, again, like this very sad set of events that occurred.
I am happy that it seems like the stepson is in the clear.
Yes. I did love their relationship here. Like they have shown him as just this really surly kid who's like throwing rocks at houses just to be a jerk in some ways and doesn't want to talk to anybody. But now it seems more like he is socially awkward. He doesn't know how to talk to people. Maybe he's on the spectrum somewhat. He always wears the same clothes, although he mocks Carol for always wearing the same fleece as well. Yeah, good point. And but it could just be that he's just one of those kids. And by the way, teenage boys, it's tough to talk to teenage boys, period. I had a period of time where one of my nephews for multiple years, maybe like around 2-year period of time, I could not get this kid to say 3 words in a row to me. So like literally like be like, can I make you a sandwich? And like him struggling to respond. I was like, Jesus, how difficult can that possibly be? And he grew out of it. But I'm just saying that being a teen.
Is that the older one or the younger one?
The younger one was the younger one.
That's funny because he seems so social now.
He's so social and was before. There was just like a period of time when it's just like communication was absolutely excruciating. I mean, with us, right? Like he got his headset on and was playing some video game and he was like a blabbermouth. But like for us, it's just like, you want to get pizza or burger? Can you shake your head or something? Difficult. It's tough times. Your hormones are going crazy.
Hormones, yep.
Yeah. So, I am, as you can tell from the length of this episode, much more interested now in the series than I was previously. Yeah. I'm very curious to see how things turn out and wanting to know a lot more about each one of these characters and their, the story from their point of view. And in the end, maybe that when we know all these additional details, things turn out to be like not so nefarious. Just life is kind of times messy and tragic. That's just how it is.
Yeah. I'm interested to see too, as we discussed, how they kind of change the format for what we're seeing and how we're seeing it week to week. I wonder what next week will bring.
Yeah, it could be like another genre. It could be like eventually, not next week, I don't think, but within a week or two, we might see them in a court proceeding, and then it becomes more of like a courtroom and laying out the case and refuting evidence, etc. in that type of context. Oh, and the last thing I want to mention to you is I did look into and I've only read one article, so there might be a lot more information that came after this original article was written. But this series is loosely based on a New Yorker article written by someone whose dentist was accused of this murder and was really curious about it. This is in New York, by the way, so not in the Midwest. So interesting that they relocated it. And when I first heard about the case, I'm like, this barely has anything to do with this show I'm watching.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll read that whole entire article because I can't imagine it spoiling anything. And then as I got into the story and kept reading it, that the stranger edge details of things that came out over time do correlate to this series. And I'm like, wow, what a weird story. Not about like a murder or whatever, but just a weird story about like and I think maybe this is where this show is going, and maybe this is what's biasing my reading of this show. The article seems to indicate in the end that we want to have this very simple narrative of what happened, but maybe life isn't that way. And if you look at anyone's life, even a relatively mundane life, and you look at every weird event that happens and string them all together, you can make anyone look like a murderer. So it's like, if you just happen to be too close to someone who ends up dead, maybe you could look like a suspect. Although, specifically in that case, these people had a pretty odd life, made some pretty weird choices in their lives. But there is a love triangle with the wife in the middle and a very weird death that is suspicious or maybe not, and some very weird evidence. And and more importantly of that is reading that article and seeing the evidence as it's presented. And again, I have not looked into additional evidence beyond this article from 2017, I think it was. So who knows, in the past 8-9 years, maybe a smoking gun has emerged. But the tone of that article is that in the end, maybe it's just not knowable what actually happened, right? So it's possible that this show also is exploring that in the end, there's no simple narrative, and maybe we just don't know. So I don't know how satisfying an ending that is for a TV series, though. So we'll have to.
Right. That's the problem.
If they, avoid that particular interpretation of details. But we will know a lot more next week, and we'll be more than halfway through the season. There's only 7 episodes, so we're closing in on an answer. And we'll be here to discuss it again, Sona and myself. And and continuing again on the podcast in general, talking about The Pit, talking about Paradise, and Paradise more than halfway through that series as well. And then a bunch of things coming in April that we'll be covering here in the podcast, including Your Friends and Neighbors, Sona, coming back.
I had mentioned to you, I actually watched the preview and it looked very entertaining.
Yeah, I've seen the trailer as well, or like a teaser. It's a very short trailer, but very fun to see this James Marsden character coming in and I thought he was going to be like an antagonist, like someone who is going to be there to destroy the protagonist's life. But very fun to see him almost like kind of hero worshiping this guy, but maybe making things worse in so doing. So intrigued to see how he fits into this continuation of the story. And more midlife crisis. Only those people do not have, I was going to say they don't have money problems, but they do. But those money problems are their own making. They're of their own making. All right, Sona, thank you again for the conversation.
Thank you.
And we will
talk to you soon.
Be back next week.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.